The year is 1888. Queen Victoria sits on the throne of a vast empire. London is the capital of the world, a beacon of progress and power, but beneath the glittering surface of the Victorian age, a darker reality festers. In the East End, the district of Whitechapel is a world away from the grand avenues and palaces of the West. It is a sprawling, suffocating labyrinth of poverty and despair. The air itself is thick with the stench of coal smoke, unwashed bodies, and the nearby tanneries. The streets are narrow, unlit, and slick with a constant film of grime and filth, a place where shadows cling to every corner and doorway, hiding secrets and dangers alike. Here, life is cheap and survival is a daily struggle. Thousands are crammed into squalid, overcrowded tenements known as rookeries. These dilapidated buildings are breeding grounds for disease, crime, and misery. Families of 6 or more might share a single airless room with no running water and little food. For many women, the only way to earn the few pennies needed for a bed in a common lodging house is to sell their bodies on the street. It is a desperate existence, lived moment to moment, where the constant threat of violence, starvation, and illness is an accepted part of life. The flickering gas lamps offer little comfort, casting long, menacing shadows that seem to dance with a life of their own. The forces of law and order are stretched to their absolute limit in this chaotic environment. The Metropolitan Police, still a relatively new institution, patrols the chaotic streets. They are often outnumbered and ill-equipped to deal with the sheer scale of the district's problems. Drunken brawls, petty theft, and domestic violence are commonplace. The officers walk their beats in pairs, their footsteps echoing through the dark alleyways, ever watchful but ultimately powerless to stem the tide of human suffering. They are seen less as protectors and more as symbols of an authority that has abandoned this forgotten corner of the city. The residents of Whitechapel trust no one. This is the world that would become the hunting ground for a killer unlike any seen before. It is a place where a person could vanish without a trace, where a scream in the night might be ignored, dismissed as just another sound in the cacophony of urban misery. The anonymity of the crowd provides the perfect camouflage. The pervasive fear and distrust create an environment where a predator can move unseen, unheard, and unchallenged. The stage was set, the conditions perfect for a series of events that would not only terrorize a city but also etch a name into the annals of crime forever. A new kind of fear was about to be born. As the summer of 1888 faded, a palpable sense of unease began to settle over Whitechapel. The nights grew longer, and the fog, thick and yellow, rolled in from the Thames, blanketing the district in a disorienting shroud. This was not the typical apprehension of the coming winter. It was something new, something more sinister. Whispers and rumors had already started to circulate about recent brutal attacks on women in the area. Emma Smith. Martha Tabram had primed the community for fear. An unknown assailant was stalking the darkened streets, preying on the most vulnerable. The term Autumn of Terror would later be used to describe this period. It began in earnest on the last day of August. The women who walked the streets at night knew the risks they took, but the grim necessity of earning their keep outweighed the danger. The attacks were characterized by deep throat slashes, extensive abdominal injuries. It was a signature, a calling card left in blood. They were not just afraid of crime, a monster who seemed to rise from the fog itself, a phantom with a blade. The date was August 31st, 1888. In the cold pre-dawn hours, a woman named Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly, walked the desolate streets of Whitechapel. At 43 years old, life had been unkind to her. A failed marriage, a struggle with alcohol, forced to drift between workhouses and cheap lodging houses. That night she had been turned away from her lodging house on Thrall Street, lacking the fourpence for a doss. Her last known words were hauntingly optimistic. "I'll soon get my doss money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now." She was last seen alive at 2:30 a.m., a lone figure heading into the darkness. At approximately 3:40 a.m., a cart driver named Charles Cross, walking down Bucks Row on his way to work, noticed a dark shape in front of a gateway. As he drew closer, he realized it was the body of a woman. Another cart driver, Robert Paul, approached from the opposite direction. Together they examined the figure. Her skirts were raised to her waist. They touched her face, they touched her hands, and still warm, moments after the attack. Unsure if she was dead or unconscious, They pulled her skirts down and left, agreeing to tell the first constable they met. That constable was John Neal, arriving minutes later. He found her lying on her back, head turned left. Her bonnet, the jolly bonnet, lay on the ground beside her. As he shone his lamp on her neck, he saw the first sign of horrific violence. A deep, dark gash ran across her throat. It was so severe her head was almost severed from her body. Dr. Rhys Ralph Llewellyn, a local surgeon, was summoned. His exam confirmed the cause of death: 2 deep incisions to the throat, through the windpipe and through major blood vessels. There were no signs of a struggle. No defensive wounds on her hands or arms. She had been taken by surprise, dispatched with terrifying speed and efficiency. The official inquest into the death of Mary Ann Nichols began on September 1st, presided over by Coroner Wynne Edwin Baxter. He noted the wounds appeared to have been inflicted with a long-bladed knife, moderately sharp and wielded with considerable force. A surgical knife, or a tool used by a leather worker or a slaughterman. The detailed reporting of the coroner's findings in the newspapers spread the story far beyond the confines of Whitechapel. The public was now aware that a new kind of murderer was at large. Just 8 days after the murder of Mary Ann Nichols, the killer struck again. The second canonical victim was a 47-year-old woman named Annie Chapman. The abdomen was cut open entirely, intestines were lifted out and placed over the right shoulder. It was a ghastly, ritualistic arrangement. The post-mortem examination it revealed an even more disturbing dimension to the crime. The killer had surgically excised and taken the victim's uterus. This fact solidified the theory that the police were hunting for someone with medical training or experience in dissecting bodies, such as a butcher or a slaughterman. The night of September 30th, 1888 would mark the apex of the killer's audacity. On this single night, the murderer would strike not once but twice, committing 2 brutal attacks in less than an hour. The killer was operating under immense pressure, with police patrols saturating Whitechapel and vigilante groups forming to patrol the streets. The first victim of the double event was Elizabeth Stride. At approximately 1 o'clock, a steward named Louis Diemschutz drove into the gateway at 40 Berner Street. His pony shied away from something on the ground. The flickering light revealed the horrifying truth. It was the body of Elizabeth Stride, lying in a pool of blood. Her throat had been slit with a single clean cut. However, unlike the previous victims, there were no other mutilations. Her body was untouched. The police and Dr. Blackwell quickly formulated a theory. The killer had been interrupted. The arrival of Diemschutz's cart likely startled the murderer, forcing him to flee. This left a dangerous, enraged predator on the streets of Whitechapel, actively hunting for another opportunity. Less than an hour after the discovery of Elizabeth Stride, the killer found his second victim. Catherine Eddowes, 46, had been released from Bishopsgate Police Station at 1 o'clock. She left the station and headed back towards Aldgate, into the Rippers' hunting ground. At approximately 1:35, she was seen talking with a man near Mitre Square. At 1:45, Constable Edward Watkins walked his beat through Mitre Square. He discovered the horribly mutilated body of Catherine Eddowes. The killer's frenzy, denied with Elizabeth Stride, was unleashed here with unimaginable savagery. Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown discovered the left kidney and a major part of the uterus had been skillfully removed and taken from the scene. A piece of her blood-stained apron was later found in a nearby doorway on Goulston Street. Above it, scrawled in chalk on the wall, were the words, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Fearing anti-Semitic riots, the police commissioner ordered the message to be washed away. After the terror of the double event, a nervous quiet fell over Whitechapel. But this brief respite was shattered on the morning of November 9th, 1888. The final canonical victim was Mary Jane Kelly. On the morning of November 9th, Thomas Bowyer knocked on the door of 13 Miller's Court. He walked around to the side of the room and peered through a broken pane of glass. What he saw was a scene of almost unimaginable horror. The police officers on the scene could only confirm Bowyer's horrific account. The room was a slaughterhouse. The level of mutilation was so extreme that it was difficult to even identify the remains as human. On the bedside table, a pile of flesh and organs had been neatly arranged. More flesh had been placed on the picture frames above the bed. The victim's heart had been removed and was missing from the scene. The fire in the grate had been burning with such intensity that it had melted the spout of a kettle. The throat had been severed down to the spine. The face was completely gone. The body was covered in countless stab and slash wounds. The evisceration was total. Her heart was the only organ taken from the room. Dr. Bond, in his subsequent report, famously constructed one of the first offender profiles. He argued the killer must have been a man of solitary habits. He described him as subject to periodic attacks of homicidal and erotic mania. After the butchery at 13 Miller's Court, the killings suddenly stopped. Mary Jane Kelly was the last of the canonical five. The police force tasked with catching the Whitechapel murderer faced an unprecedented challenge. They were working in an era before modern forensic science, armed with little more than basic observation and rudimentary techniques. The idea of preserving a scene was rudimentary. Scenes were trampled, contaminating evidence, lifting fingerprints, analyzing hair and fibers, conducting DNA testing, all science fiction then. Fingerprinting was absent, a critical hurdle. Blood examination was primitive too. A chemist could say, "It's blood," but couldn't reliably tell human from animal. Landsteiner's discovery of blood types was still a decade away. The Whitechapel murderer did not operate in a vacuum. His crimes were amplified and in many ways defined by a powerful new force in Victorian society, the mass market press. The most famous of these was the Dear Boss letter. It was signed Jack the Ripper. The press, recognizing the sensational value of this moniker, immediately published the letters. The most disturbing of all the communications was the From Hell letter. Inside the box, along with the letter, was half of a human kidney, preserved in spirits. These letters, whether real or hoax, cemented the Ripper's legend, giving a voice to the monster in the shadows. This failure, however, served as a powerful catalyst for change. The hunt for the Ripper laid the groundwork for modern detective work. The intense media spotlight on Whitechapel exposed the horrific living conditions of the urban poor, helping fuel calls for social reform. Jack the Ripper was never caught. His identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries. The list of potential suspects is long and varied. Each theory is compelling, yet none is supported by definitive proof. The five canonical victims, Polly, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine, Mary Jane, were not just props in a killer's macabre drama. They were women whose lives were stolen by poverty before they were ended by violence. The shadow of Jack the Ripper lingers not just as an unsolved case, but as a timeless testament to the terror that can be born when a predator finds the perfect hunting ground.